see. I'm doing some of these story nuggets. I don't like that. Which is a story premise and a story seed. So, golly, I just had one. I just had one. I was gonna try it in grok. Nice. How was it? I was gonna try it. How do you know I'm drinking a coffee? How do you know I'm drinking a coffee? Haha, I don't actually know that. You caught me. I was just rolling with a casual vibe from I just had one and throwing out a fun guess. Cool, okay. The I think the premise here that I was thinking about was straight from Moby Dick. Premise was men fed up, and then the story seed. None of us have money. None of us could work for political reasons. Now, that's not the same thing as not the same thing as a fragment of narrative. It's just a story. It's just writing down the story. Um, in the shadow of the third correction, the men of the old working class had finally run dry. No savings left, no jobs they were allowed to take. The loyalty oaths, the debanking lists, the AI vetted social harmony background checks, every door slammed shut for anyone who'd ever spoken the wrong words online or refused the wrong jab. That's deep. They weren't revolutionaries by choice, they were just hungry. Loose crew of them. Ex-truckers, mechanics, welders, coders, blacklisted for memes. Hey, that's real. Crammed into a writing rental and exurbs. No money for rent next month, no prospects, just rage, cheap beer, and one functional laptop someone had smuggled past the net filters. That's a little bit narrative-like. Yeah, that's a little bit narrative-like. The plan wasn't grand at first. It started as bitter jokes around a folding table. If they won't let us work, we'll make work impossible for them. And now that's a revolutionary title scene. But that that story nugget. Oh gosh, is lifted straight from Moby Dick. Call me Fishmail. Haha, not even close. What? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm serious. I can't believe Grok just said, haha, nah, not even close. One thing that I think is Grok has been unhinged lately. I think there was an update to all the personalities, personas, by default, is unhinged. So I'm going to go in to Gemini and type the same thing. So the story nugget is the premise men have had enough, not giving up, they've had enough. The idea, what was that? It's so hard to remember this for me. None of us had money. And let's see what happens without any kind of prose fragment. It's going to go with a totally different thing called the spark. The shift didn't start with a political manifesto or a massive corporate strike. It started because the math simply stopped working. Oh, it's kind of the same. Every guy in the neighborhood was running on the exact same treadmill, working 50 hours a week, just to fall $200 short of rent. Staring at digital bank accounts, it felt like a countdown clock to zero. The collective realization didn't hit at a grand rally. It hit on a Tuesday night at the local diner when 6 guys realized none of them could cover a $14 tab without checking their phone apps first. Narrative arcs to explore: decentralized dropout, quiet strike, barter and muscle economy, absurdist reclaims, just like arcs. What about arc? Arc. The pedantic debate: work versus having a job. Who works? Who just has a job? Union management, like high rage debate on a fishing boat over who is the boss. That's an arc. The engine of the Sea Wolf is idling, a low, wet rumble that vibrates right through the deck, plates into the souls of everyone's boots. The smell of diesel, salt water, and cheap tobacco is thick. You're gonna have like a union traditionalist versus a mid-level management castaway, freelance cynic. That's kind of like Fight Club. What's your take on Fight Club? Redo it. I'm gonna ask some questions of this model. Is all of this just structure, or is there any oomph? How do you put that? The structure is the scaffolding, but the oomph is the blood and the noise. Let's strip away the outline and put you right on the deck. Here's the raw muscle of that scene. Okay, so it's going to go through, and I'm going to say rate that oomph level 1 to 10. It's a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's got grease, it's got grit. Dialogue feels like teeth scraping together. The oomph is there because the stakes aren't academic. It's 3 broke guys on a dead boat in the middle of a cold ocean. Here are some prose fragments. The ocean spray tasted like I won't say smelled like garbage water mixed with rain. I like this there in the distance. That is so basic. Rose. I was gonna say tatter. There in the distance, rose. Tattered flag from the mast of the SS Pinot. SS Galleon. But it's going to weld those fragments right into the marrow of the scene. This is how you take it to a 10. Oh, we're going to take it to a 10, man. No debating, no academic posturing. Just three broke, desperate men, a dead engine, and a ghost on the horizon. The ocean, it's the three men thing. The ocean spray smelled like garbage water mixed with rain, slapping them in the face every time the hole dropped into a trough. The gray fog was thickening, turning the sky into a greasy ceiling that felt low enough to touch. Mark didn't just look out at Miller, he loomed over him. The cold had gotten into the deep tissue of his shoulders, a dull, bumping ache that made every breath taste like iron. You want to coordinate? Mark's voice wasn't a shout anymore. It was a low, jagged rasp, right in Miller's ear of the sloshing of the bilge. Go on, dial the office, tell the board of directors the water's coming up to the floorboards. Tell them the labor force is sitting on its hands. I kind of got some humor out of that, just reading that. And now let's go back and narrate that story in the voice and style of Millview. Call me no call me no name. For name is a luxury of those with coin to anchor it. I like that. The salt spray that day bore no scent of old romance, nor the clean, sharp bite of the deep Atlantic. It smelled of the world's awful, garbage water wed to a cold, unchristian rain, slung like dishwater into our faces by an indifferent hand. The sea wolf wallowed, her iron ribs groaning a low, mechanical miserere as she dropped into each trough of the gray, unreckoned swells. Above us, the vault of heaven was a greasy ceiling, pressed down so low it seemed a man might reach up his hand and smutch his fingers on the soot of it. Mark loomed upon the deck, a great, broad-shouldered anvil of a man, shaped by the dull, repeating weight of crates and heavy lines. The frost had burrowed deep into the marrow of his collarbones, and his breath came in short, jagged puffs like the stream of a dying engine. Go on then, Miller, he rasped, his voice scraping low against the slap of the bilge. Coordinate the sea, reach into thy coat, pull forth thy tiny glass engine, and dial the high clerks in their counting houses. Tell them the labor is sitting on its hands and the green water is rising through the timber. Mark, Miller, a smaller vessel but possessed of a fierce, desperate vanity, did not give way. His jaw went to clattering, half from the bitter mist that bit through his fine, logo-stitched wool, and half from that supreme, terrifying revelation that a man's title cannot cross salt water. With a cry like a gull hooked in the throat, he reached forth and seized the coarse canvas of Mark's coat. It was no gesture of war. It was the frantic, clutching prayer of a sinking creature seeking bottom. I gave men bread, Miller cried, his eyes bloodshot with the brine, his knuckles showing the ghastly lard white of the dead. 20 households ate from the scratch of my quill for 5 years. Think you that is a shadow? Think you because my fingers remain clean of the pot grease I did not bleed? I consumed myself for that house, Mark. I turned my youth to ash, and now his voice broke like dry pine. I have nothing. He shook the great canvas coat, but it was as a dog shaking the flanks of an ox. Apart from them sat Artie, perched upon a crate of curdled plastic, indifferent as an idol. He held an old pocket knife, his blade clicking with a dry, rhythmic scree against the black carbon of a fouled spark plug. He did not lift his eyes to the storm, nor to the men who strove. Aye, pull upon one another, Artie muttered, and his words had the flat, level weight of sods falling on a box. Tear the rags from each other's backs. Save the sea the labor of your drowning. Look north, fools. With a heavy, careless sweep of his arm, Mark flung the clerk from him, sending Miller staggering back against the slimy bulwarks of the bait well. Mark turned his face full into the wind, his eyes narrowing into slits against the stinging, foul-scenting reek of the spray. The gray shroud of the world tore open then, just a ragged, smoking seam in the fog, lasting no longer than 3 pulses of a frightening heart. There in the distance rose a tattered flag from the mast of the SS Galleon. She was a monstrous thing, a 300-foot engine of the trade, a floating slaughterhouse that 2 seasons past had been chained to a Seattle pier by the long iron arm of the law, left there to rot under the gaze of the lawyers when her corporate masters vanished into air. Yet here she wallowed, a black and silent leviathan, lifting her rusted iron flanks to the heavy swells. No lantern gleamed from her high bridge, no eye of the fire blinked from her iron sides, no radar sang her approach. She was a great, unpeopled tomb of iron drifting blind through the soup, her shredded house pennon whipping against the gray sky like the broken wing of an albatross. A silence fell upon the deck of the Sea Wolf, a silence so vast and primitive that the small, bitter anger of the men vanished into it as a drop of oil dissolves in the main. They stood as statues, staring at that ground, ungoverned wreck. Miller wiped the salt from his lashes, his breast heaving under his wet garments. "What is her purpose out here?" he whispered, and his voice was small. "She has none," Mark said, and his great hand closed slowly, instinctively around the iron shank of a gaff hook. "She drifts, Miller, same as me, only she hath a greater weight to sink with." Next scene, they navigate to the galleon and prepare to board her, with knitted ropes and knitted rope ladders. But Miller is speaking intermittently in one long arsed run on sentence the whole time because he wants to bomb a cigarette. They board the galleon, but Miller is in back. Oh no. Oh no. Come on. Will not let the guy in the middle cross without giving him a smoke. Grabs him by the leg and demands it. Gets it. Then of course, then loses the cigarette at sea. This is during a squall. It is not bad. It is not a bad, what do you call that? Condensed little presentation in the next scene. The distance between our small drowning tub and that black leviathan lessened, not by our own navigation, for our engine remained as dead as the Pharaohs, but by the foul, magnetic drift of the sea, which loves to knock 2 wrecks together. The Sea Wolf sheered close under the iron cliff of the SS Galleon, her rusted flanks rising and falling in the swells like the walls of a wet dungeon. while the sky above broke into a sudden vicious squall, slinging needles of ice water through the fog. Mark, standing at the bow with the netted rope ladders coiled over his shoulder like a web of old hemp, prepared to throw, his jaws set against the gale, while Miller, driven mad by the cold or the terror, or that agonizing itch where only the weed can scratch, began to pour forth a frantic, unstopped torrent of speech. One long, arsed run-on sentence that rattled from his teeth like gravel shifted by the tide, saying, "If you've got one, just one, Mark, I swear, by the bones of my mother, I'll pay you threefold when we hit the sand, or even twofold if the market stays dry, for my tongue is like leather and the salt is in my throat, and you've had that pack in your oilskin since we left the slip at dawn. Don't tell me you haven't, because I saw the cellophane gleam when you leaned over the bilge, and a man can't be expected to climb into the jaws of a ghost ship without a single spark to keep the breath warm in his lungs. So just give me the one, the small one, the bent one. I care not, so long as there is a leaf in it." Mark gave him no answer but the heave of his arm. The netted ladder flew, its leaded weights clanging against the galleon's iron rail, catching fast upon some rusted cleat above. "Stop!" Mark roared over the shriek of the squall, and he went first, his great boots finding purchase in the wet twine, singing out over the churning froth, where the two hulls ground together like with a sound like teeth breaking in the dark. Artie followed, nimble and silent as a ship's rat, ascending into the wet belly of the fog. Miller came last, his fingers clawing at the ropes, his long sentence still trailing behind him in the wind like a shredded pennant. But as they reached the midway point, suspended 20 feet above the boiling surf, where the garbage water slammed against the iron plates, the madness of the lack took him wholly. Artie was above him, Mark was already over the rail, but Miller, gripped by the green sickness of his need, reached up with a white, dripping hand and seized Artie by the ankle, arresting his climb in the very midst of the squall. "The smoke, Artie, the smoke," Miller shrieked, his voice rising above the howling gale, his boots dangling in the air as the ladder swung wide in a sudden gust. "You won't give it, but you have it. I know you keep them in the oiled tin beneath your vest, and I swear by Christ, I will not let this go. I will hang here until the sea takes us both, or until you pass down one dry stick of Virginia leaf to save a man from perishing of the flat rock." Artie hung there on the wet rope, the rain driving sideways into his eyes, his old face twisting a look of grim, ancient disgust. He did not kick. He did not curse. He simply reached into the bosom of his flannel, pulled forth a single salt-stained cylinder, the last of his private store, and dropped it straight into Miller's upturned, watery eye. Miller caught it against his cheek, his teeth snapping like a hound's, his heart giving a great triumphant leap inside his wet ribs. He let go of the leg, stuffed the prize into his mouth with shaking fingers, and scrambled over the iron bulwark of the galleon like a man who had conquered kingdoms. He stood upon the iron deck, the wind tearing at his hair, his fingers groping frantically in his pockets for a match, and any dry scrap of phosphorus to bring the fire home. He turned his face into the teeth of the squall, his lips parted around the white weed, crying, "I have it! By God, I have!" A great green sea whale hit the galleon's flank then, throwing a wall of spray 50 feet into the air. The black wind caught the cigarette, plucked it from his salt, slick lips as cleanly as a bird snatches a worm, and whirled it away into the gray, roaring waste of the ocean. Miller stared into the dark water where it had vanished, his mouth still open, his hands frozen in his pockets. Artie climbed down off the trail, his pocket knife already outlooked him. "The boss," Artie spit, and walked into the dark of the ship. Next chapter. already finds the grave worm. The boat is pitch black in the squall. None of them know if there is anyone else aboard, alive or dead. They debate how to sleep that night, not knowing the danger, or if there be no presence of life other than theirs. And there's no antagonist right now. This is them. The main character, I think, would be, who knows? It's just a trio right now. It's just a trio of protagonists. There's no antagonist yet, but it's still pretty crazy. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm sitting here trying to drink a coffee. There's logic to it. This works. You can almost work it. Man, that was a lot. That was a lot. That was a 26-minute session. And I'll tell you, if they are supposed, let me tell you about standards. You're supposed to learn this in high school. Education standards. You're supposed to learn this in high school year 2000. Now, it didn't hit me until I was about 40 about how all this works. Oh, the glorious curriculum. And that was some advice I got. I read somebody's long form about 10 years ago. I don't do a lot of reading. Unless I really sit down and prepare for it, kind of like lifting weights for me. But someone said, wait till you're about 40. If you absolutely cannot do it, you can't work on your chops, you can't figure out your craft, you don't know structure, you don't know narration, wait till you're 40 and it'll just start hitting you. Oh, the glorious curriculum of the year 2000. Right at the tail end of the No Child Left Behind Genesis, when high school English teachers were still desperately trying to make 16-year-olds care about 19th century nautical dread. If you were sitting in an American public school sophomore English class back then, right between learning how to format floppy disk and practicing for state standardized tests, this is exactly what they were trying to pump into your skull. The year 2000 curriculum standard, American Romanticism and the Anti-Transcendentals. By 10th or 11th grade, the state standards dictate you move past basic plot summaries and start identifying literary movement and voice. So you needed to know, we're talking about story right now. We're just talking about story because it's just like a little thing at the foundation. Use atomism. Story is different than plot, right? Right. So you can write a little story and then narrate it if you want. The story is what the book is about. Plot is just a sequence of events used to get the point across. Okay, cool. So you can write a story. It's what the piece is about. Remember those little things like someone was down at the lake. Little nuggets, little premise. That turned out really good. There's a source on it though. That is really, really, really good. Oh my gosh. Cool. So play with it, man. Peace out.